The story begins in a distant sector of space, far beyond Earth's core systems. On the outskirts of the solar system specifically, near the icy moon of Europa, humanity had expanded into the stars over the last century, establishing mining colonies and research stations throughout the outer planets. While still seen as newcomers by many of the older galactic civilizations, Earth had proven itself resilient, innovative, and quietly powerful. But too many alien factions, especially those operating on the darker edges of law and morality, humanity's scattered presence made them a tempting target. Two young girls, Lena and Amira, were daughters of engineers, stationed at Europa's mining colony. That night, during a routine systems diagnostic, the base's communications went dark. The security logs showed nothing unusual, and by the time anyone noticed the absence, the slavers had already come and gone. They didn't launch a full assault. They didn't use brute force. Instead, they executed a swift infiltration, exploiting maintenance windows and power reroutes to enter and exit unnoticed. The girls were not taken by accident. They were selected. Human juveniles were considered highly valuable on the black market due to their adaptability, emotional depth, and physical resilience. These traits made them prized assets for alien nobles, corporate collectors, and in the worst cases, gladiator trainers and organ traders. The slavers operating under the banner of the Dorok Syndicate forged identification tags and reclassified the girls as biological salvage. To circumvent interstellar law, they had listed them in the auction manifest, not as humans, but as a rare Terran-adjacent species technically different enough to avoid legal scrutiny. They were loaded aboard the Verkala luxury auction ship headed to Tralix 9, a mid-tier station infamous for hosting discreet, high-value flesh markets. Chained at the wrists and ankles, the girls were separated and kept in stasis cells, designed to dull cognitive activity. They were treated not as people, not as property objects, to be displayed and sold. The auction hall itself was an architectural marvel, a floating palace orbiting a pale blue gas giant. Inside, alien elites lounged on gravity-defying cushions, sipping synthesized nectar and watching a revolving stage of living merchandise. Slavery was officially illegal within the galactic trade conglomerate, but Tralix 9 operated under a veil of independent jurisdiction, where enforcement was intentionally lax and profits dictated policy. It was during the pre-auction scans that a hidden signal activated, unbeknownst to the slavers. One of the girls, Lena, had been implanted with a covert emergency beacon by her father, a former Martian defense engineer. Designed to activate only under extreme duress and specific neural patterns such as fear, pain, and confusion, the beacon was a tiny chip behind her ear. Dormant since infancy, when the auctioneer's assistant came to prepare her, Lena's terror triggered the device. It was only 6 seconds long, a silent burst of encoded data sent through quantum pulse relay. To most systems, it would register as static. But Earth's orbital defense net, equipped with high-level AI listening protocols, flagged the pulse instantly. Within 5 minutes, the signal reached Central Command in Geneva. Admiral Reyes, overseeing the Deep Colony's security network, was pulled from a strategic summit and shown the data. The screen displayed 2 coordinates, the point of origin Europa Colony and current destination Tralix 9. Accompanying it was a compressed visual snippet, no audio. Just a few frames showing Lena's frightened face, eyes darting toward the ceiling camera as alien hands pushed her forward. Reyes didn't need a vote or a meeting. He issued orders with chilling precision. Classify this as a Black Protocol event. We're not waiting on council permission. I want full silence, full burn. At the time, even Captain Lin, his trusted operations officer, thought the reaction might be too extreme. After all, these weren't soldiers. This wasn't a battlefield. But something deeper stirred in Rhea's voice, a rage. Not just professional, but personal. Quiet understanding passed between them. This wasn't just about 2 girls. It was about what it meant to be human. Earth had been quiet for too long. The galaxy had mistaken that quiet for weakness. Now the spark had landed, and the fire was coming. The emergency signal sent from Lena's hidden implant may have lasted only 6 seconds. But its impact rippled through the most powerful command centers on Earth like a thunderclap. The data had been received, verified, and decrypted. It contained 2 crucial pieces of information: the location from which the girls were taken, Europa Colony, and their current destination, Tralax 9, a space station infamous for its legal gray area and underground auctions. Admiral Reyes, head of the Deep Colony's security network, was known for being a calm and collected strategist. But when he saw the faces of the 2 abducted girls and the transaction logs from the auction manifest, something changed in him. The moment was quiet. No shouting, no panic, just a heavy silence that marked the birth of something monumental. Earth's military and intelligence network had grown exponentially over the past 50 years, though much of it was kept hidden from the wider galaxy. Humanity had unified after centuries of division, not through ideology, but through survival. The memory of near-extinction events, planetary wars, and alien exploitation had driven humans to become something the galaxy still didn't fully understand: deliberate, unified, and terrifyingly efficient when provoked. Captain Lin, standing beside Reyes, was the first to speak. "Sir, confirmation protocols are clear. This was a sanctioned slave trade. But Tralax 9 operates under the conglomerate's protection. Any interference could Reyes cut her off. This isn't about protocols." He issued 3 orders immediately. Lock down the Saturn colonies. No inbound or outbound traffic. Total communication silence. Redirect all scout drones from Jupiter and Neptune sectors to form an observation ring around Tralax 9. Mobilize strike group Black Sun. Captain. Lin hesitated at the mention of Black Sun. It wasn't part of any public database. It's not even military. Command was fully briefed on its capabilities. It was a ghost fleet, developed in secret after the failed Council peace accords. It's meant to act as Earth's silent scalpel in the event of galactic threats that required absolute, untraceable force. "Sir, Black Sun hasn't been deployed ever," Lin warned. "Its activation is reserved for extinction level." "They took our children," Reyes said simply. "It's an extinction level event." And just like that, the silence was broken, while the galaxy buzzed with its usual noise trade. Negotiations, border disputes, and political posturing, Earth's war machines stirred beneath the surface. But it didn't make a sound. There were no declarations, no public condemnations, no diplomatic backchannels. Humanity didn't bother broadcasting its rage, because rage doesn't ask for permission. Humanity had long understood that in space. The only laws that mattered were the ones you could enforce. For too long, Earth had followed the rules. They'd sat at the galactic table, smiled politely, and watched as other species dismissed them as barbaric newcomers or post-war primitives. Now, that image would shatter as Strike Group Black Sun began silently moving toward Tralax 9. Cloaked and undetectable, Earth's AI systems, quiet, omnipresent observers of galactic networks, began compiling data. Station. Every buyer on the auction manifest. Every slaver ship's route, supplier, and contact. No piece of the system was ignored. This wasn't just about destroying a few criminals. It was about making a statement that could not be misinterpreted. In the quiet corridors of Earth's orbital command center, Lin reviewed the Black Sun's warpath projection. It wasn't a direct assault. It was a surgical burn. Precise, unstoppable, and irreversible. "They won't see it coming," she whispered. Reyes nodded. "That's the point. What made the strike group terrifying wasn't its size. It was its philosophy. Every ship in Black Sun was designed around asymmetric warfare. Drones that could infiltrate infrastructure and turn it against itself. Smart munitions that learned and adapted mid-combat. And kinetic weapons that required no energy, just gravity, velocity, and a target. Humanity had learned that light shows and energy blasts impressed alien militaries, but Earth didn't care about impressing anyone. They cared about justice. Back on Tralax 9, the auction was preparing to begin. The girls had been cleaned, dressed in ceremonial chains, and were being moved to the main hall. The slavers were smug. the buyers were relaxed. No one, not even the station's defense AI, suspected that Earth had noticed or that retribution was already en route, because the galaxy had mistaken humanity's silence for weakness. But in truth, it was just the stillness before the fire started. Tralix 9 was a marvel of alien engineering, a floating luxury station built into the orbital arc of a gas giant, nestled in a calm, high-traffic trade route. Cloaked in legitimacy and protected by layers of bureaucratic red tape, it had functioned for decades as a neutral zone, where black market dealings took place under the guise of independent commerce. At the heart of the station, the auction hall gleamed. High-ranking elites from a dozen species lounged in floating amphitheater seats, sipping luminous drinks and discussing merchandise in sterile tones. Everything had been arranged. Girls Lena and Amira had been washed, dressed, and placed in ceremonial restraints. The chains weren't just to dehumanize, they were symbolic. A message to the buyers that the galaxy still had power over life, but the galaxy had made a mistake. They forgot Earth listens, and Earth remembers. And now, Earth had arrived. Tralix 9's defense systems never even issued a full alert. The first sign something was wrong was a slight vibration in the walls of the auction chamber, so subtle it could have been a fault in the environmental systems. Then, without sound or warning, a massive kinetic impact struck the upper docking bay, a tungsten rod. Fired from a stealth orbital launcher at orbital velocity, hit with the force of a small nuke. There was no explosion, no beam. It's just an absence where metal and life had once existed. There was now simply vacuum and debris. The second strike followed 8 seconds later, severing the station's communication array. Traloxstein was now blind, and mute panic began to ripple through the hall. The elites looked at each other, unsure. Their guards reached for weapons. The auctioneer demanded an explanation from Central Security. There was no answer. Then came the third strike. Black Sun's infiltration drones breached the outer hall using ultrasonic cutters and liquefied entry points, Mimea spilling into ventilation. Systems, power nodes, and data cores. These weren't soldiers. They were assassins with circuitry. They didn't fire lasers or bullets. They corrupted the station from within. Power grid reroutes, overloaded circuits. Oxygen systems reversed polarity. Internal lights flickered into chaos. Doors sealed. Escape pods jettisoned. Empty the buyers. Screamed. The slavers ran. But it was too late. Earth's Black Sun fleet emerged from cloaked formation just outside the station's remaining sensor range. 10 ships, matte black and devoid of insignias, drifted into firing position. Not a single human voice was broadcast. Not a demand. Not a threat. Just a signal, a looping transmission of the auction catalog. Flashing one by one through the names and species of the buyers, the sellers, the organizers, the feed was amplified and sent into open galactic space. Humanity didn't want secrecy, wanted witnesses at that moment. A series of Hunter-class drones, cylindrical pods laced with nanite containment, launched from Earth's warships. These weren't designed to destroy ships. They were designed to turn ships into executioners. The drones latched onto every slaver vessel docked or orbiting nearby. They drilled through the holes, injected nanite programs into ship systems, and seized control of targeting protocols. The slaver fleet, once a proud formation of transporters and armed frigates, began turning on itself, one ship firing into another in perfect synchronization. By the time station personnel realized what was happening, more than half the fleet had been obliterated by friendly fire. The few that tried to escape jumped to FTL only to re-emerge in artificial dead zones seeded by Earth months prior. Black Sun had anticipated every escape route. The traps were already in place. Meanwhile, inside the station, a strike team of human marines dropped through the breach, fully sealed in adaptive armor. They moved with terrifying precision, slicing through resistance, ignoring non-combatants, and navigating directly to the auction floor. As the remaining guards raised weapons, the humans didn't hesitate. It was not a battle. It was a purge. Seconds later, the Marines reached the girls. Lena and Amira were huddled near the back of the hall, eyes wide, tears streaking their dust-covered cheeks. The lead Marine knelt, scanning them. "We're here," she said softly. "You're going home." Behind her, the last of the slavers died, screaming. Consumed by his own ship's failing gravity generator, the auction hall whence a monument to cruelty was now rubble. Its walls scorched, its lights flickering into silence. But Earth wasn't done. The entire operation had been recorded, every death, every scream, every second of vengeance. Earth broadcast it system-wide, not to boast, but to warn. For every being who had ever profited from human suffering, the message was clear. We saw what you did. We know who you are. And now, so does everyone else. The galaxy had auctioned Earth's children, so Earth lit a fire that would never be forgotten. With Tralix 9 annihilated, the galaxy was thrown into a frenzy. It wasn't just the destruction that terrified the interstellar elite, it was the precision, the speed, and the message. No warning, no diplomatic backchannels, no ultimatum. Earth had identified the slavers, eliminated them, and broadcast the footage galaxy-wide. In one coordinated operation, Earth had achieved what? Decades of interstellar policing and endless tribunal meetings never could? A permanent, unforgettable response to the trade of sentient lives. But the story didn't end with vengeance. It escalated into a reckoning as the ashes of Tralix 9 still floated in orbit. Dozens of planetary governments and trading alliances issued formal condemnations against Earth. Alien ambassadors stood before their respective newsnets, expressing deep concern over humanity's disproportionate actions. Some demanded reparations. Others threatened sanctions. But even as they spoke, their own systems began to fail. Galactic credit markets, once carefully regulated by the conglomerates, AI ledger systems began to collapse. The cause? A virus? Not a typical one. This was Earthborn code crafted in the underground code labs of Luna's Black Sector, sharpened in the quantum firewalls of Martian black sites. The virus didn't steal or erase. It simply flipped the switch. The banking nodes of over 50 major trade worlds began reversing transactions, freezing assets, or redirecting entire fortunes to orphan relief funds on Earth. The system's trust collapsed. Wealth meant nothing. If Earth could rewire the flow with a few lines of code, that's when the truth began to settle in. This wasn't just retaliation. It was infrastructure-level warfare. 3 major trade federations attempted to strike back, first diplomatically, then electronically they failed. Earth's A is long rumored to be sentient, but never confirmed, began locking out entire planetary networks. Starports couldn't calculate jump trajectories. Navigation hubs began showing phantom systems and blank star maps. Ships were being stranded mid-jump. Commerce halted. Traffic rerouted into dead zones or lost in digital mazes. Suddenly, Earth wasn't just a planetary force. It was a galactic filter, one that could choose who got to function and who didn't. The message was clear, not shouted, but whispered in every corrupted data stream. No one touches our children. No one trades in chains, ever again. At the Interstellar Tribunal, held deep within the safe, bureaucratic core of the Orion Arma special session was convened. Species once indifferent to slavery now trembled as footage of Earth's precision. Assault was replayed on the central dais. A Zarnathi diplomat, his species having benefited for generations from off-record auctions, stood and stammered, "Humanity has gone too far. There must be restraint." A representative from Earth, Ambassador Naira Halaka, woman with gray eyes and a face as unreadable as stone, stepped forward. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply placed a small object on the table before them, a broken metal collar. Etched on its side was a human name, Lena Kyraeus. Gasps rippled across the chamber. Many recognized the surname Admiral Reyes, the man who had ordered Black Sun's deployment. Halleck met the Zarnathi's eyes and said, in a voice that echoed without need for amplification, "This was your restraint."
Ow.
Then she reached into her coat and placed another object beside the collar, a data shard. Embedded within it was the full list of every buyer and seller from the Tralax 9 auction. Identities, bank accounts, coordinates. Earth had shared it with no one, until now. Back on Earth, there were no celebrations, no parades. The girls Lena and Amira were quietly returned to their families. They had been through unimaginable horror. The priority now was healing. But the world didn't forget. Candles lit windows across Terran cities. Public squares filled with silence, not speeches. Holographic murals appeared overnight, depicting the girls not in chains, but as radiant sparks, igniting a bonfire that tore across stars. Across refugee worlds now under Earth's protection, freed slaves, human and alien alike, began calling Earth not just a world, but a shield. A place that remembered. A people who fought when others forgot. Earth passed the unification. Charter amendment within days. Humanity recognizes no sovereignty that permits slavery. Any such regime will be treated as an enemy of Earth. It wasn't a suggestion. It was policy. And Earth, through silence, speed, and relentless fire, had made it law by the end of the standard cycle. 3 more slaver hubs self-destructed rather than risk being discovered. Others fled to the galactic rim, terrified of even mentioning Earth. The price of chaining to children had become astronomical, because in doing so, the galaxy had awakened something ancient and furious. Not just vengeance, but principle, and Earth had only just begun. In the aftermath of Earth's surgical annihilation of Tralax 9 and the silent economic collapse it orchestrated across major trade hubs, the galaxy had been forced to confront a reality it had long denied. Humanity was no longer a distant newcomer, to be mocked or tolerated. It was a force of nature, measured, calculating, and devastating when roused. But perhaps the most frightening truth for the rest of the galaxy was this: Earth didn't do it for power. It did it for 2 children. Lena and Amira were recovered alive, malnourished, bruised, and psychologically scarred. Yes, but alive. Found in a backup freighter hidden behind Tralax 9's auxiliary bay, the girls had been placed there when the auction was interrupted, as the slavers scrambled to preserve high-value merchandise. They weren't meant to survive the chaos, but they did. The human Marines who rescued them did so not with fanfare, but quiet purpose. The operation wasn't called liberation. It was called retrieval. Because for Earth, these 2 weren't victims of war. They were family. Their recovery, however, marked a turning point. What began as an isolated act of vengeance now evolved into galactic transformation. Earth had already established itself as a subtle power in technological warfare, but the Tralax strike forced many governments and empires to realize that Earth's advancements had gone far beyond expected boundaries. Black Sun wasn't just a fleet, it was a philosophy. Strike fast, speak last, leave only truth in the ashes. The galaxy's slave trade didn't vanish overnight, but it fractured badly. Networks dissolved themselves preemptively. Auction houses went dark. Elite families who had profited for generations sold their estates and fled to remote systems, terrified of Earth's growing reach. But Earth didn't pursue them indiscriminately. Instead, it did something no other empire had ever considered. It offered refuge not just to humans, but to all species who had suffered under chains. Across the stars, thousands of freed beings found safe haven in the Terran Republic. Refugee fleets were escorted by Earth's warships. Human engineers constructed orbiting cities for them. Psych teams and medical aid were dispatched without cost, without question. For every child sold, Earth responded not only with fire but with shelter. It wasn't charity. It was justice, in schools on Earth. A new lesson was introduced into the core history modules, the Sparks of Tralax. It taught students not only what had happened to Lena and Amira, but why the world had responded the way it did. Not with speeches or embargoes, but with action, with principle, with fire that burned the system, but not the soul. Public spaces across Earth began to display holograms, not of warships or soldiers, but of 2 young girls holding hands beneath starlight, their chains broken, their faces lifted not in grief, but in defiance. They became symbols, not of what was lost, but of what would never be allowed again. Ambassador Nira Halleck, representing Earth at the restructured Interstellar Tribunal, introduced what became known as the Terran Accorda, single-page declaration that nations could sign voluntarily. It read, "We recognize the right of all sentient life to freedom from forced servitude. We acknowledge the suffering caused by silence, and we accept that if Earth must act again, it will do so without restraint." To the galaxy's surprise, hundreds of minor systems signed immediately. Even some larger empires, once complicit in the slave trade, signed out of fear, shame, or the simple realization that Earth wasn't bluffing. Because Earth never threatened, it promised Lena and Amira. Never return to the stars. They grew up on Earth, surrounded by protection, love, and quiet dignity. They never gave speeches, never became celebrities. But their names were known across space, not as victims, but as sparks. Sparks that started the fire. Sparks that lit the way forward, sparks that changed the galaxy, and for generations to come. Every slaver who dared whisper of rebuilding the trade. Every noble who thought they could exploit the helpless. Remembered the haunting phrase etched in thousands of languages onto every Terran border gate. Engraved on orbital defense satellites and AI-controlled drones sold like slaves. Remembered as sparks, Earth brought the fire. The stars, once indifferent to suffering, shone a little brighter because Earth had taught them to burn.